Imagine being born into a world where your very existence meant you were second class, where the law allowed some people to vote and others to be silenced, and where simply trying to register to vote could make your life dangerous. Imagine growing up poor, working in the fields from dawn to dusk, and yet finding a voice so powerful it shook the nation. This is the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman who transformed from a sharecropper into one of the most fearless advocates for voting rights in American history. Her journey is not just inspiring, it is a blueprint for courage, resilience, and the fight for justice. On Legends Without Applause, this is exactly the kind of life we bring into the light. Fannie Lou Hamer was born on October 6, 1917, in Montgomery County, Mississippi, one of the poorest areas in the country. She was the youngest of 20 children in a family of sharecroppers. Life for her and her siblings was harsh and unforgiving. They worked long hours in the fields, planting, picking, and harvesting crops for landowners who controlled every aspect of their lives. Education was minimal, medical care was rare, and freedom was limited. For people like Fannie Lou, the world was structured to keep them invisible. To survive meant obeying rules made by those who had every advantage. Even in these conditions, Fannie Lou displayed a quiet determination. She loved to learn, even if schooling was limited. She understood early on that knowledge was a form of power, even if the people around her did not recognize it. Her family instilled in her the value of hard work and resilience, lessons that would carry her through extraordinary challenges later in life. By the time Fannie Lou was a young adult, she had married and was working full-time in the cotton fields. The system of sharecropping trapped families like hers in cycles of debt and poverty. Their labor produced wealth for others while leaving them with barely enough to survive. Despite the grind of daily survival, Fannie Lou's awareness of injustice grew. She began to see that the laws and practices that governed her life were deliberately designed to keep people like her powerless. She noticed that African Americans in her community were systematically denied the right to vote. She understood that without political power, nothing would change. Her opportunity to act came in the early 1960s. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, were reaching into the Deep South to challenge segregation and disenfranchisement. Fannie Lou was introduced to these activists and immediately recognized that their mission aligned with her own sense of justice. She made a life-changing decision. She would risk everything to fight for the right to vote. Registering to vote in Mississippi at that time was an ordeal designed to prevent African Americans from participating in democracy. Prospective voters were subjected to literacy tests that were arbitrarily graded, had to answer questions on the state constitution designed to confuse, and were often intimidated by officials or local white citizens. Many who tried to register faced harassment, violence, and economic retaliation. But Fannie Lou persisted. In 1962, she finally succeeded in registering to vote. That small victory was monumental. It was the first time in her life that she had a voice recognized by the system, even though that recognition was fragile and conditional. Fannie Lou did not stop with her own registration. She began traveling across the Mississippi Delta, educating others about their rights and encouraging them to register. She helped establish local voter registration drives, holding meetings in homes, churches, and community centers. The work was dangerous. Activists were threatened, beaten, and even murdered. But Fannie Lou's resolve never wavered. She understood that political power was the key to achieving broader social and economic change. Without it, the cycle of oppression would continue. Her activism brought her into direct confrontation with entrenched power. In 1963, she attempted to attend a political party convention in Mississippi as a delegate, representing newly registered African American voters. She and other activists were turned away, humiliated, and excluded. Rather than retreat, Fannie Lou used these moments to galvanize others. She became a voice for the voiceless, speaking with clarity, conviction, and a moral authority that could not be ignored. Her speeches were rooted in her lived experience. She spoke of labor, of poverty, of the humiliation and courage of ordinary people who dared to assert their rights. In 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer gained national attention at the Democratic National Convention. Representing the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, she appeared before the Credentials Committee to challenge the all-white delegation that claimed to represent her state. Her testimony was televised, bringing her voice into living rooms across the country. She described the violence, intimidation, and systemic racism that African Americans faced when trying to vote. She spoke not in abstract terms, but with vivid, personal detail. The evictions, the beatings, the arrests, and the deep, persistent courage of those who refused to be silenced. The nation was forced to confront the reality of voter suppression in the South, not as an idea, but as a lived experience articulated by a woman who had suffered and persevered. Her courage inspired others, but it also made her a target. Mississippi officials retaliated by firing her from her job, harassing her family, and attempting to intimidate anyone associated with her activism. Yet she persisted, establishing organizations and coalitions to continue the fight. She co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to provide a legitimate political platform for African Americans who had been excluded from the political process. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the voices of ordinary people, those who had labored in fields and been denied justice, were heard on the national stage. Fannie Lou Hamer also understood the intersection of civil rights and economic justice. She recognized that political power alone was insufficient if people remained economically oppressed. She encouraged cooperative farming, community development, and self-sufficiency programs. She helped establish Freedom Farms, an initiative aimed at providing African Americans with land, food security, and resources to resist exploitation. For her, civil rights and economic empowerment were inseparable. One could not exist without the other. Her advocacy extended to challenging the federal government to uphold constitutional rights. She met with legislators, gave interviews, and maintained a public presence that ensured the struggle for voting rights remained visible. Her voice was compelling not just because of what she said, but because of who she was, a woman who had endured systemic oppression, who had worked fields from dawn to dusk, and who had transformed personal suffering into collective action. She embodied the principles she spoke about, making her arguments impossible to dismiss. The risks she faced were immense. Activists in the Mississippi Delta were frequently threatened by local authorities, harassed, beaten, or even killed. Yet Fannie Lou Hamer insisted on nonviolent resistance, training communities in strategies to survive intimidation while asserting their rights. Her leadership style was pragmatic, grounded in lived experience, and deeply empathetic. She was able to inspire people who had been conditioned to believe their voices did not matter to believe, instead that collective action could change society. Her work contributed directly to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This landmark legislation prohibited racial discrimination in voting, outlawed literacy tests and other barriers, and empowered federal authorities to enforce voting rights protections. Fannie Lou Hamer's relentless advocacy, organizing, and public testimony helped create the political pressure necessary to achieve this historic reform. Her impact was national, even if her name was not always recognized alongside more famous leaders. Despite her national influence, Fannie Lou Hamer remained deeply connected to her community. She returned to the Delta regularly, continued to mentor younger activists, and never lost touch with the ordinary people whose struggles had shaped her own life. She understood that real change required sustained effort, not symbolic victories. She worked to ensure that African Americans had access to education, housing, and economic opportunities, understanding that political rights without practical empowerment would remain hollow. Fannie Lou Hamer's legacy is both immediate and enduring. She expanded the definition of citizenship in America, demonstrating that political power was not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. She transformed the experience of disenfranchised communities, turning fear into action and silence into testimony. Yet she remains relatively unknown outside activist circles, a classic example of a legend without applause. Her life reminds us that the fight for justice is often carried by those who will never receive the highest accolades or widespread fame. It is carried by people willing to endure hardship, to speak truth to power, and to persist when recognition is delayed or denied. Her story also challenges us to consider the connections between personal experience and social activism. Fannie Lou Hamer's understanding of oppression was not theoretical. It was rooted in her own life. Her speeches resonated because they reflected lived reality. She demanded that society acknowledge the humanity, dignity, and political agency of people who had been systematically excluded. She did not merely advocate for abstract principles, she fought for tangible change that improved the lives of ordinary citizens. Her leadership provides a model for understanding how grassroots activism can influence national policy, especially when it is combined with moral clarity and strategic organizing. Fannie Lou Hamer passed away in 1977, but her influence continues to shape American society. Her work paved the way for future generations of activists and leaders, particularly in the areas of voting rights, economic justice, and community empowerment. Her life demonstrates the power of courage, persistence, and moral conviction. She shows us that ordinary people, even those with limited resources and facing immense obstacles, can achieve extraordinary change. Her story is a reminder that the individuals who drive history forward are often overlooked. They do not seek applause. They serve, organize, teach, and fight because they recognize that injustice cannot be ignored. Legends Without Applause exists to tell these stories, to ensure that people like Fannie Lou Hamer are remembered not only for what they achieved, but for the courage, persistence, and vision they embodied. Her life exemplifies the essence of unsung heroism, a relentless commitment to justice in the face of systemic oppression, personal risk, and societal indifference. Fannie Lou Hamer's journey from the cotton fields of Mississippi to national prominence in the civil rights movement illustrates a profound truth. True leadership does not require privilege, fame, or comfort. It requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to confront injustice directly. Her life is a testament to the power of ordinary citizens to reshape their society, to demand recognition for their rights, and to inspire future generations. Her example challenges all of us to consider how we respond to oppression and how we recognize the contributions of those who fight for justice without expecting personal accolades. This is why Fannie Lou Hamer belongs on Legends Without Applause. She serves as a model for courage, a blueprint for activism, and a symbol of resilience in the face of oppression. Her work fundamentally changed American society, expanding access to political rights, empowering disenfranchised communities, and inspiring countless others to continue the struggle for justice. Her story reminds us that history is often written by those who receive applause, but the foundations of change are laid by those whose work is quieter, less recognized, but no less essential. Fannie Lou Hamer's life teaches us that heroism is often measured not by recognition, but by the impact of one's actions, the courage to speak truth to power, and the persistence to fight even when the odds are overwhelmingly against you. Her legacy challenges us to seek out and honor the contributions of those who work tirelessly behind the scenes, whose names may not appear in textbooks or headlines, but whose efforts shape the course of history. Her journey from the cotton fields to the national stage remains an enduring lesson. Change is possible when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice, organize collectively, and persistently demand the rights that are inherently theirs. Fannie Lou Hamer did not ask for fame, she asked for justice, and through her life and work, she achieved it for millions, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire, teach, and empower. Her story is a call to action. It is a reminder that each of us has the capacity to fight for justice in our own way, to lend our voice to the voiceless, and to persist even when recognition is uncertain. Fannie Lou Hamer did all of this. She serves as a beacon of courage, an emblem of resilience, and a true legend without applause. Her life shows that the measure of impact is not in the applause we receive, but in the lives we touch, the barriers we dismantle, and the rights we help secure for those who come after us. This is the essence of her legacy, and the reason her story belongs on Legends Without Applause. To remind us that true heroes often serve in silence, yet their contributions shape the world in ways that endure far beyond their own time.